Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our session today, our marketing session. And it is my pleasure to present to you Professor Sherry Norman, who will be the moderator for today's panel. She is an experienced marketing executive, financial strategist, and educator. She served as a senior vice president and partner manager for two publicly traded companies, U.S. Bancorp and City National Bank. And she also pioneered the field of internet marketing at E-Trade during its startup days. She is the co-founder of Norman International and serves her community on the boards of the local Girl Scouts and for her church. As a marketing instructor at California State University, Dominguez Hill, Ms. Norman is educating future chief marketing officers in Southern California. Professor Norman, the floor or the screen is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to have this group of people together, these professionals. You're going to have a very informative session this morning. We've got a great group of people. Just in our pre-panels, it was an exciting discussion. So I'm sure you will find that this is informative, and we'll start to introduce our group today. So again, I'm Sherry Norman, and we have a group of professionals from the local world, the federal world, some very interesting professionals. So we're going to start off with bios so that our folks can introduce themselves, and you can start thinking as attendees, maybe some questions you want to ask at the end of the session as well. So I'm going to start it off with our four panelists. I'm going to give you their name and their current jobs. So if you're taking notes, and then I'm going to ask them to just do their initial biography so you can get a sense of the group that you're with today. So first off, we have Michelle Corson. She's a public relations officer for Kern County Public Health Services. I know you're already starting to think of your questions for her. Jamie Francisco, public information officer from the city of Los Angeles. Right, so we're covering all of California here. Gretchen Franke from, she's a regional director in the Office of Foreign Missions for the U.S. State Department. U.S. Department of State. And Kevin Rohr, Chief of Strategic Communications at NASA's Armstrong Flight Research Center. Right, so welcome to all of you that are joining as attendees. Welcome to all of our esteemed panelists. I'm going to ask each of them to give a quick bio. So I'll call on them individually. So listen carefully to where they're coming from to help you form your insights into how you might want to engage with them throughout this session. First, we'll start with Gretchen. Gretchen, go ahead and give us a quick bio of where you're coming from, and then we'll go over some specific questions. And Gretchen, you're on mute.
There we go. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect. You sound great. Welcome.
Great. Excellent. So good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Gretchen Franke. I work for the Department of State. And just to be clear, when I say that, sometimes people say, which state? So I work for the United States Federal Department of State. Our name is less obvious than Department of Defense or Department of Labor. We are the executive branch entity responsible for carrying out the president's foreign policy objectives. So I am a public diplomacy officer by trade. I am what we call a generalist. So that means I've had a lot of different jobs within the State Department, and they change every couple of years. So I've worked in Monterrey, Mexico, as a Panama City, Panama, Washington, D.C., Nicaragua, and Warsaw, Poland, most recently before coming to Los Angeles. But prior to joining the State Department, I worked in marketing and sales and international licensing for the National Geographic Society. And prior to that, I had actually quite a long career in hospitality, where I was the director of guest relations at the Ritz-Carlton. So I have a lot of broad background that is mostly all about relating to people in different areas. And I'm happy to talk more about that in whatever way is helpful. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, you have a great, very diverse background, so we're going to come back to and ask some specific questions as well. So welcome. Thank you. Michelle Corson, why don't you go next?
Good morning, everyone. It is a thrill to be here. Yes, Michelle Corson. I am the Public Relations Officer for Kern County Department of Public Health, which is a county level agency. I'm part of the government here in the county of Kern. And I have about 20 years of experience in public relations. Before my current role working for the county public health department, I've worked for other departments within the county, the Department of Social Services, as well as Kaiser Permanente, which kind of got me a flavor for the health world and doing marketing and public relations before coming here 5 years ago to the Department of Public Health. As the public relations officer, I'm essentially myself and my colleagues, we're a small but mighty team of 3, myself, a graphic artist, and another marketing associate. We're in charge of really all the communications and education from the public health department to our community, as well as our internal communications. Public health departments have become really front and center during this pandemic. So I love to take a moment to say, you know, I think a lot of us have learned now what public health does as far as disease control and prevention. But here we do so much more. We have an emergency medical services division, which we oversee all of the ambulance response here in our county. We also have a variety of other health programs in our public health division. But then we have our environmental health division, where we are, responsible for the safety of food in restaurants and hazmat responses. So I am thrilled to work for such an incredibly exciting agency that we are public servants to really work to protect the health and environment of our community. So I love my job. I feel like I have my dream job, and I hope all of you get that dream job as well, and you certainly can. So I'm a local girl. I'm born and raised in Kern County. I went to Cal State University, Bakersfield, and my degree was in public relations with a public speaking emphasis. Well, a communications degree with a public relations emphasis. So I think that's enough for now. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic, welcome. For those of you that are attending, thanks for that. We've had a few more people join. Thank you. We're just going through our bios and look already with just our first 2 panelists, amazing backgrounds that they've had and are able to share with you. So be thinking about any questions you might want to ask. All right, next up, Jamie Francisco, Public Information Officer, City of Los Angeles. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jamie Francisco. I'm the Public Information Officer for the City of LA's Economic and Workforce Development Department. Our department is specific to, or we're dedicated to developing and implementing programs that yield thriving businesses and create job and career opportunities for Angelinos. My team is, very, very small. It's me, a part-time graphic designer / social media person, as well as a webmaster. And so our department, or the communications division, is essentially, we have the opportunity to tell really wonderful stories about how our department helps the most underserved and underrepresented communities throughout the city of LA. We have a network of 16 work source centers, 14 youth source centers, and 9 business source centers that help people get jobs, that help youth get back into school or get training for careers in the trades or whatnot. And we help also connect small businesses to resources that perhaps they aren't able to get loans from traditional lenders, giving them guidance in terms of helping get their businesses started. And so, we have our team has the wonderful job of getting to tell those success stories. And this has been especially crucial during COVID-19, just because our department has been very key to helping people obtain critical COVID-19 financial resources, as well as kind of stay afloat during the pandemic. Our department primarily helps, we're a standalone department, but we also help City Council and the Mayor's office in terms of helping them push forward their initiatives. So prior to joining the city of LA, and I've been here about 5 years. I started out as a newspaper reporter. I worked at the San Jose Mercury News, the Sacramento Bee, Chicago Tribune, and then after that, I kind of transitioned into marketing and proposal coordination for environmental and transportation engineering firms. So I really enjoy my job. I find it incredibly rewarding, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have about, going into government careers, entry level or mid career. Thanks.
Fantastic. Welcome. We'll want to learn more about your travels in the news business as well. That was very fascinating. All right, next up is Kevin Rohr. Kevin's the Chief of Strategic Communications, NASA's Armstrong Flight Research Center. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Kevin?
Sure, thanks, Sherry. Appreciate the opportunity here. NASA Armstrong Flight Research Center is one of 10 NASA centers across the United States. We're actually located on Edwards Air Force Base in the Mojave Desert outside of Lancaster, California. I oversee a team of about 13 people right now, and we do everything from public affairs officers, which is spokespersons for the agency. I have a historian on my team, as well as social media folks. Got an exhibits person, someone who coordinates speakers bureau, and all sorts of other public engagement. So my very brief career profile, I started out working as a contractor to another government agency doing an exhibits program where we did a lot of trade shows and fairs. From there, I became a federal civil servant and started working in the nuclear side of federal government with the Department of Energy. And as one could imagine, everything with things radioactive and nuclear are typically not received well by the public. So a lot of crisis management and defending positions and educating the public on just what we did there. While I was working for the Department of Energy, I had a unique opportunity to go down to Kennedy Space Center, where we supported the launch of the Cassini New Horizons probe that was going to Pluto, which has already passed Pluto and is way further out there. Long story short, I saw how NASA did work, saw the rocket launch, and just fell in love with the agency and applied for every job I could. And I got the job in 2008 and I've been here ever since, and so happy to be working with NASA. It's for 9 years running, we've been the best place to work in federal government, voted by employees. So I look forward to sharing any career insights I can. I've got a bachelor's in marketing and a master's in business and organizational communication. And I really got into my line of career because I broke my leg. I'll tell you more about that later. Thanks,
Oh,
Sherry.
interesting. Interesting. Kevin, I'm going to go right back to you. Tell us a little bit more about the how you found the career path because you broke your leg. That's interesting.
And everything works out in the end, right? So just after I graduated from college with my master's degree, I was applying for all sorts of jobs. Went to a basketball game and had a freak accident where somebody jumped on my back, was not waiting for it, and they fell down on my leg and shattered it, which basically disabled me for about 6 months. But in the meantime, I had all sorts of interviews lined up with private industry. I thought I was going to do corporate annual reports, and I thought I was going to work in the financial side of public affairs, but all those jobs I applied for couldn't even go and travel to the interviews. So had to move back home with my parents, spent 6 months recuperating, and my dad just happened to say, hey, there's this cool job that's opening up in public affairs where I work doing this nuclear stuff. Maybe you should apply. So I applied, got the job, and the rest is history.
Oh, that's fantastic. And that is exactly what our attendees, I'm sure, are facing, those types of choices. Sometimes we face a little adversity. We've been talking a little bit about, really this public sector world that folks aren't necessarily familiar with some of these jobs. But this year, many of you have been put in the forefront because of COVID, because of some of the things going on in kind of the public sector. So a lot of you have become superstars in the public side because of all the work that you're doing that used to be behind the scenes. Right. So Michelle, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what your daily activities are like right now, especially given the COVID world and the things that you're doing behind the scenes to help us as we kind of navigate through the COVID world.
Yes, this I will say this is a once in a lifetime, what I have been through professionally, myself and my colleagues, this past year and a half during COVID-19. You know, when you're the public relations officer for the local public health department, in my case, and I would say I speak with state level public health folks. I've even spoken to some federal during this pandemic, and it has truly become all that we do. All of my duties have faded a bit to the side, and all that is COVID-19 has dominated. In my particular role, my director of our department really uses me as the voice with media and to the community. So I have, for the past year and a half, been speaking directly with our local media and national media, frankly, on daily basis, answering media inquiries, doing interviews, doing educational events. So that has truly become my regular gig, so much so here locally that I get stopped and they're like, "You're that COVID girl." So it's a little overwhelming at first, certainly, but this is what we train for, right? This is what, when I went into the field of public relations, I love communicating and I am intrigued by media. I've never, like some of my fellow panelists, I've never been part of the media per se, but I love our media partners. I am fascinated by communications, and especially publicly being able to speak concisely and describe what we are going through together during this pandemic and how to stay safe, how to stay up to date on this information so that we all know how to navigate through our lives with the most current relevant information that's coming from federal to the state down to the local jurisdiction, which is who I represent. So it has been an incredible journey. I live on adrenaline now, and I don't know when I'm gonna be able to face a life of normalcy. Not that a PIO's life is ever normal or boring. It's extremely intense and exciting, but nothing will ever, I believe, compare to the year that this has brought. I hope nothing does. But in addition to that, all the social media, so much is now on those digital platforms. Our website, how do we communicate via social media? I love that. That's what I did when I worked for Kaiser Permanente, was strictly social media. So young people coming up, those digital jobs and having that savvy to be able to communicate digitally is so important. And that's a big part of what I do as well. So I might stop there because I could go on, but it's been an adventure.
So tell our attendees what type of courses you studied in college to become a public relations person.
Yes, so I, again, was a communications major, and I chose of emphasis of public relations and public speaking specifically within that. So, I love talking. And I hate to say this, at the time I picked communications because I didn't like math. Isn't that a terrible thing to say? But I'm going to be very honest. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I thought I might want to be a teacher, but then I'm like, I love people. I love communicating. So I picked this major, and I did speeches all the time, and I learned how to communicate orally, and I loved it. It scared me to death, but I loved it at the same time, which is quite interesting. So that's kind of the study, organizational communication, interpersonal communications, all of those fun classes that you get in that communications field. Again, not knowing quite what I was going to be able to do with it. And that's a journey in itself, how I got to this point. But those are the kinds of things I studied.
Yeah, and what we're trying to show here is that it really is a journey, right? What you study in college is the basis, but with Kevin's story of taking a different path because of an incident, right? You took this path. Jamie, where did you study, and what type of degree did you get?
Sure. So I studied in my undergrad degree. I was a communications and women's studies major at UC Santa Barbara. While I was at Santa Barbara, when I was younger, actually, like in high school, I took this workshop that was for aspiring journalists that was sponsored by Dow Jones. And during one of our mentors there was a former LA Times reporter that said that what really matters in your, is also like when you're trying to get into journalism is make sure that you have really solid clips. And sometimes people will have better grades than you, but if you have more experience and you do, you pound out some stories, that is going to be what gets you the job. And so after UCSB, I took a job as a staff writer for the Fallbrook Bureau of the North County Times, which has now since been absorbed by the San Diego Union Tribune. But I was the youngest reporter in their smallest bureau. We had like a haunted photo room, and but it was really great exercise in terms of developing clips, writing stories about, it's the avocado capital of the world and that kind of thing. From there, I wanted a little bit more experience, and so I actually pursued a master's from the Columbia Graduate School of Journalism. So while I was there, made some really great connections. And from there, ended up doing a Kaiser internship in urban health reporting at the San Jose Mercury News, which is great because had an opportunity to cover healthcare in the tech universe there. And from there, I got picked up by the Sacramento Bee, where I covered the city of Folsom along with other stories. And then from there, I was picked up by the Chicago Tribune, where did general assignment reporting. At that point, they had just started the continuous news desk. So this kind of ages me in terms of that it was just then that they were starting the 24-hour news cycle. But after I got to a point like where newspapers, and it's still something that seems to be shrinking a bit, where I realized, okay, well, a lot of people that I admire are getting laid off, and so what else can I do? So I ended up transitioning into marketing. The experience that I gained covering environmental impact reports for the city of Folsom helped me have a better understanding for the consulting side. Ended up writing proposals to help our consulting firms win work to do environmental analyses of like landmarks throughout California. So that was really exciting. But, when I was in transportation engineering, it was, we got to build bridges and do like all these great things that for the infrastructure of California. And then from there, I was living in Sacramento at the time, and various life circumstances. I'd lost my job, and I actually had always wanted to move to LA. So I moved to LA, and I didn't have, I think like I had a temp job actually as the cupboard manager for the Girl Scouts, in Marina Del Rey, Sherry. And, I ended up, working in government is sort of a family business. My dad, multiple family members were in the Navy, U.S. Postal Service, and then I had a cousin that worked in military intelligence, and it was the family business, and IRS too. And so, I was interested in, becoming a public servant. Ended up getting a job at the City of LA's for the Economic and Workforce Development Department, and it's been like a really great fit. All the experience that I've had in my life has managed to help inform the work that I do today. We write a bunch of success stories, like all these businesses that have received financial assistance from the city, various regional programs, had a chance to work collaboratively with LA and county, like LA city and county agencies, as well as nonprofits, to talk about some of the financial assistance programs that we provided, as well as people that are still finding work and youth still managing to get summer youth employment opportunities, except that they're virtual now. And so it's been really rewarding. And
listen to the diverse amount of paths that you took to get where you are today, right? It's like you have to be tenacious. You have to use the education or training that you've been given, and the networking that you did throughout that process to find the positions that you are in and were in.
Oh yeah, definitely. It was good to, for instance, getting hired at the City of LA. One of my best friend from journalism school, he had a friend that was a Pilates instructor. He knew somebody that worked at the city, and they recommended that I apply for a job. So you never know where those connections.
The value of networking.
Definitely.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
that's
about it.
Great, excellent. So Gretchen, thanks for your being on the call today. And I know that you also have a diverse background from a professional standpoint. How about the types of education or training that you had to get where you are today?
Well, I mean, like everybody else, I think the takeaway here is the is great to have as a broad outline, but life is what happens when you're making other plans. And so, am I connected okay? Can you hear me?
You're okay.
I see
Yep,
my
you're
internet connection going in and out a little bit. Okay, so I studied international relations in college without really much of a sense of what I wanted to do long term, except possibly be a lawyer. So I applied to law school. I decided not to go to law school, and I started working in marketing for an architectural and engineering firm. And I really enjoyed the process of just putting words together to sell something. I made my way to a hospitality industry and was there for about 8 years, which was not a lucrative business to be in, but it was really rewarding because, again, you got to work with people all the time. And at the Ritz-Carlton, my last job there, I was responsible for called the Director of Guest Relations, which sounds a little bit like Julie from the Love Boat, but I was responsible for how do you build loyalty among your customers. But sort of before Ritz-Carlton was part of Marriott, and there was no reward program. You didn't get points for staying. You know, we built loyalty with our guests by understanding who they were individually and tailoring their individual experiences, property to property, because the lifetime value of a customer was $500,000. I got burned out eventually from the hours and the low pay, and I made a transition through a friend to working at the National Geographic Society, where I licensed international editions of the magazine. So I would work with, say, German publishers, magazine publishers, who would take all of our content and they would then publish that magazine in Germany. So they were responsible for the translations and some of the local content and selling advertising. And my job was really more like, how do we leverage this and make money on the licensing and protect the brand? So the constant for me has always been branding. You know, how do you sell? And so now I sell the United States, right? And that the Foreign Service exam is my super secret. The Foreign Service exam that I took to become a diplomat is very much like the interview that I used to give people to come to the Ritz-Carlton. Feel like I have a little bit of insight as to how that process works. But now my job is to sell the United States and to influence foreign public's perceptions of the United States to create an environment where we can move our policy goals forward. And that is a really interesting job because, people think of diplomats as the people who are going to cocktail parties. There's certainly some of that, right? Those are our political officers. That's great. But the policy, what our policies are, that comes from me as a public diplomacy person. What we say is the policy. And so there's a lot of power in who takes the pen, as we call it. And I think it's really interesting and amazing to see some of the ways in which I've been able to influence the United States' relationship with other countries in order to move forward our policy goals in service to the American people. And that's really what I think is quite a commonality between the jobs, but I think that's really it, is the sales and understanding the image that you're trying to project.
Oh, interesting. Really interesting, all the work that all of you are doing and how it affects our personal lives on a day-to-day basis that we don't even know that this work is going on behind the scenes. So thank you. Interesting. Kevin, how about you? What is your daily activities like when you hit the road to do what you're doing for your organization?
Yeah, that's kind of a hard one to pin down because every day is a little bit different. But in a typical day, we could be working on sending out a news release about a new discovery. We could be preparing for a large exhibit event. We go to lots of air shows and public events. Actually, pre-COVID, we did this last year. We haven't done as many, so we've had to adapt how we use technology and connect with the American public. One of our driving principles at NASA is we are one of the few federal agencies that actually has a specific language in our authorizing law that says NASA will disseminate information we learn to the widest audience practical. And so as part of that, we have a dictation or a requirement from Congress to actually go out there and tell the public about what we're doing. Some of it is done through social media. I think Michelle said earlier, those skill sets come to play every day. I actually have a person who does nothing but social media. We have lots of different social media accounts at our center and across the agency where we're always pushing out messages and new content. I have a historian who literally is writing books, and he's documenting the history of NASA so we can then publish that and share it with the world. So maybe having conversations with him one day, the next day we may be planning for a big news conference of some sort to announce a new discovery, or we may be rolling out the latest X-plane as part of the flight research projects we do. We have a lot of experimental aircraft we call X-planes, and we're preparing for the first flight of one of those coming up probably at the end of this year or early next year, and it will be an all-electric aircraft. We don't just walk into that and do it the day before, the week before. Planning started almost a year ago for that event. It's refining our messages, it's connecting with the media, it's starting to build the hype along the way, and then actually conducting the event. And then a lot of post-event evaluation, how are our messages received, and what does the public think about it? Lots of other areas we work into. I mean, the next day I could be doing a panel discussion like this and connecting with the public or various interest groups through our Speakers Bureau. Lots of different ways. And let me go back, if I can, Sherry, to the education side, and didn't talk about it, but when I graduated with my bachelor's, I had a 2.5 GPA. Would have never thought I could work for NASA. I applied for other agencies, and it was through that career experience that I was able to build my portfolio to a point where NASA said, hey, this guy's got something. So for those that don't have the 3.5 or the 3.0 or the 4.0 or 4+ GPA, you can still do whatever you want to do out there. You just need to figure out what that career niche is and apply yourself towards it, and then take steps to get there. So it's all possible.
So when you think back about your college experience, was there one teacher, one class that made a difference for you, that helped you get through that that college process?
Yeah, there actually was, and his name is Dr. Dan O'Hare, and he has since retired, but he was at New Mexico State University when I met him. That's where I went to college. He went on to Oklahoma. But in my senior year in my marketing degree program, I needed an elective, and I was going after a marketing degree. So I thought, well, let me take this communications class called Business and Organizational Communications. It was fascinating. It brings in the psychology, the sociology, the business environment, and all aspects, and it looks at the corporate structures. And through that class, and I think my theme paper for a class I did for Dr. O'Hare was looking at corporate cultures and mergers and acquisitions, and that just intrigued me. And so much so that I said, well, you know what, I want to come back and get a degree in this topic. And Dr. O'Hare helped me write my degree program for a business and organizational master's degree. It didn't exist, so we wrote it together. I didn't want an MBA because at the time in the 90s, MBAs were really popular. I wanted to differentiate myself a little bit from the rest of the group. And that was the start of trying to market myself and my brand and what I wanted to do.
Right, so we're looking for mentors, we're looking for that spark. Take the class that you didn't know that you maybe don't need it for your major, but you want to learn something. I know Steve Jobs took calligraphy, right? Or art. Sometimes those take us down paths just from the learning and the experience. So I'm going to jump back to Gretchen. You had mentioned there was an exam that you had to take. Was there any class or any spark there? And then what is the exam that you had to take to get to the position that you're in?
Well, and to be honest, the Foreign Service exam has changed quite a bit since I took it. It used to be that you took a written exam. If you passed the written exam, you were invited to take an oral assessment. And then if you passed the oral assessment, you were put on a list once you had obtained a security clearance, and then you basically waited for a spot to open up. So that process could have taken about 3 years. And for me, it was, I went on the register, I passed the oral assessment in 2007, so I took the exam. Yes, it was a 3-year process for me. They've changed it considerably, and I don't know all of the details, but we actually have a diplomat in residence who does about recruiting for the State Department, and I would be happy to loop back to you with his contact information for specifics and how process is currently working.
That's great. Any mentors or specific classes you took in college that kind of gave you a spark or that helped you, that was different than what you thought you would want to be when you were in college?
Well, I wish I had a more profound answer to that, but I didn't really know what I wanted to be in college, and it was a lot of trial and error along the way. I really thought for a long time to be a lawyer, and it turned out that because I love language, and I thought that would be really interesting. So by the time I started talking to lawyers, I realized that seemed a lot less interesting than I had previously perceived. So I actually would say when I got to the end of college, I was a little bit lost to what my next steps were going to be. And it just, I think, like so many of us, it becomes a process of looking back and understanding how one step led to the other, but not necessarily having a defined plan for any of it.
That's actually a very profound answer. Because what you're saying is that sometimes we don't know the exact path we're going to take. Sometimes we always thought we were going to be a lawyer, and then we learned more about it. So when we go into college, we may not know. Even when we come out of college, we may not know. But we're still, you're using all of the skills that you learned. You're also willing to try new things, willing to take on roles to make sure that you are making that next step forward without letting fear get in the way. Right?
Yeah, and I would also say, the other thing, and I used this line the other day in a different context, but it's the same. I think it's where you're planted, right? In whatever situation you find yourself in, focus on what you can learn and take away from it, because those life skills, I learn them every day in each new interaction that I'm in. So I think it's really important to understand that, everything is a learning opportunity, and you don't know when those components are going to become valuable to you or create that aha moment. But, I personally think that everybody should work in food service or retail, because if you have done that, it gives you a humility and a sense of understanding of how to work with other people and for other people that is incredibly useful in myriad other ways. And so, I worked through college and I had all of those kinds of experiences that helped me understand sort of what I enjoyed doing and what fed my soul.
Oh, that is so true. I swirled ice cream cones, and it was the best job I ever had because I learned how to deal with people. And people are always going to be part of any career path that you take. Thank you. That was very interesting. Both Kevin and Gretchen on the mentoring and in the classes. Michelle, how about you? Any mentors or experiences in college that helped lead you to the path you are, or gave you a spark?
I would echo Gretchen, who is very fascinating. I wasn't really sure. I knew I liked talking to, I liked communications, right? Psychology was my minor. I was battling on, which one do I major in? Because I'm just fascinated by humans and how we interact and how we communicate with one another. So I wasn't really sure. Then I got into this whole marketing piece of this and my classes. So after college, I just started applying for all of these marketing jobs. There was a part of me that would watch the reporters, the broadcasters on television and think that would be fun, right? I really thought that would be super cool, but that obviously didn't happen. So I stumbled around in a few jobs trying to find my path. And my first job was for Ginny Craig Weight Loss Center. And again, helping people, used more of my psychology. And anyway, my journey continued from there. But I like what Gretchen said, is finding something that feeds your soul. that is absolutely true for me. I was finding places where I could get my foot in the door in industries that were important for me, and helping people finding my path to being a public servant became my calling. And that's what drove and fed me. And I followed that, and I got fortunate enough along the way to, through my circle and my networking and some breaks that I got, and trying to be the hardest person in the room, the hardest working person. I'm not the brightest by any means. In fact, my GPA, Kevin, I'm so glad you shared that. I struggled through college. So anyway, that's what I'll share for now.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. Jamie, how about you? Any similar stories from college or from mentorships?
Sure. So I had actually wanted to be a newspaper reporter since I was a senior in high school. And when I was in college, I actually decided to try different things. Like I interned in DC for the National Organization for Women. I worked various jobs. One of them was I was in the audiovisual department, where whenever people needed to, send signals like, oh, here's a video or something that we're watching at a class, this kind and very behind the scenes work. I worked like the front desk at like a student office, but I ended up watching this comedy show where the comic had said, what is it that you want in your life, and going ahead and pursue that. And then so I went on ahead, and the mentors that I had were other journalists, other people that helped me kind of navigate the newspaper world. And after getting to a certain level in newspapers, I realized, wow, I've been working here my whole life and I don't like the workplace culture. So, so I got there, and then I did feel like I was faltering a little bit, even though, I did get a lot of experience in marketing. And it was only after arriving at the city of LA as a PIO that I felt like I found like a calling again, that I really feel that I belong here. I really have received a lot of mentorship from a previous general manager that she used to be a city council person, and she just pretty much, was incredibly savvy, and I was able to gain a lot of experience working for her. I'm still learning a lot today. I've learned a lot from different people. I've also spoken to other public information officers that they work for politicians that very much understand, and that's something interesting working in the government. Like there's a lot of politics involved in terms of what things that you release and things just kind of information that is disseminated. So but definitely it's helpful to have mentors that are in your field, maybe a bit higher than you, or even friends that are in similar fields and whatnot. So so definitely yes.
So networking, mentorships, being open to new paths. Some of you have traveled, right? Some of you have had the opportunity to study in different places, to travel to different places. So being open in your career to the travel also opens doors. How about some adversity? Michelle, any paths or adversity that you've faced that you've overcome as you have progressed through your career?
Ooh, that's such a good question. I would say early in my career, the adversity was I couldn't get the jobs I thought I was qualified for. I feel like if I could give advice to students is, I was so focused on getting through college, I didn't explore, mentoring opportunities, or, exploring and trying to volunteer at some of these jobs that I perhaps was going to be interested in. And therefore, when the time came that I was applying for these marketing positions, and they'd say, well, you have your college degree, but what work experience that is relevant in these areas have you explored? And I couldn't say anything. So I had to kind of do that in my early career, and that is what I did. And then doors began to open. So I would say it was challenging in that I thought the doors would fly open and these jobs would welcome me because I had my college degree and I worked so hard. And it just wasn't that easy. And I had to kind of navigate through that and start at the bottom and do some jobs that maybe I didn't love. And then realize once I'm in an organization and I start building those relationships and I start understanding the world around me and I have my eyes set on a position I want, move toward that. And with hard work and determination, that ended up happening, but it wasn't always easy. And I'd say that's probably something that was a struggle for me early on. And now I realize it built me into the hardworking kind of person that I don't take my job for granted at all. Because I always remember there's a line of people behind me that want my job right now, that'll work really hard. And I am so lucky to have this job. And so that's kind of what I try to bring to this position every day.
Excellent. Gretchen, how about you? Any adversity or hurdles that you had to overcome?
I mean, I really, really echo what Michelle just said, which is, you know, wherever you are, your best foot forward, invest in the job that you are supposed to be doing so that you can learn what you need to move forward. Because I had a very similar experience. It was, you know, I'm the first generation of my family to go to college. You know, neither of my parents came from a socioeconomic background where they went to college. So there was a lot of focus on going to college, but then there was not a lot of understanding about, you know, how you maneuver in the world to get jobs after that. So my experience that I didn't have a family environment where it was clear how to make those next steps. And so I basically did the same thing as Michelle. I mean, I know what I wanted to do, and first jobs I took were not what I wanted to do, but I still did my best at them and develop skills that could get me the next job and learn how organizations work. Because even now, you know, the stuff that I learned doing administrative work straight out of college, if you don't, it's kind of like doing the hospitality and the food service. You know, if you don't understand what people who are supporting you and helping you as you go up in your career doing, then it's also harder to get the kind of work done that you'd like, right? So that humility of understanding that you know what the different pieces of the operation are, and that you're not too good to do them, goes a super long way in, I think, in my success, because my team knows that I have their back and will do whatever needs to be done to make the team's mission succeed. So
great advice, especially around that team building and building that trust with people. If you show that you're working hard, people will follow and will work hard as well. So setting that stage for others as well. Kevin, in addition to your basketball accent, any adversity or advice for our attendees today?
Yeah, I was thinking about it, and I spent probably about 14 years of my career facing adversity when I was with the Department of Energy. I actually worked with a subset of them called the National Nuclear Security Administration. And part of what we did was radiological experiments, nuclear weapons experiments. How do we ensure that the nuclear weapons stockpile of this country was going to be safe, reliable, and function as designed? I think when you say the word radiation, most people probably cringe a little bit. And parts of our job, elements of my job, was to find disposal options for high-level nuclear waste. Well, nobody wants to have a high-level nuclear waste rod in their backyard because they don't know what it's about. They fear radiation, and excuse me. So part of my job was actually going out there and to be blunt, selling it. And I likened myself, for those that have seen the movie Thank You for Smoking, there's a great quote in there that the alcohol, tobacco, firearms, the gun industry, as well as the tobacco industry, called themselves the merchants of death. And it's crude, but I almost likened myself to that every day going into the job, because I was defending viable, positive solutions for nuclear waste and these types of things, yet the public didn't want to hear about it. So dealing with strategies and communicating to that audience was really difficult. And through my experience and training and other things, realized that you don't go in there with the hard sell. You got to be empathetic, you got to understand, and maybe get a positive point out there. But before you could relate to people, or before you could push your topic or your issue, you had to first relate to people, gain their trust, and get on a common understanding. So I really, that whole part of my career was almost adversity every day, trying to figure out ways that we can better communicate topics that people didn't necessarily want to talk about, but were important for this country.
Now, all of you have given us some great background, some adversity, some information about the classes that you took that would help with your careers. We're coming up on the first hour of our session. So I'm going to jump over. There's 2 questions in the Q&A section of our session. So I'm just going to ask those 2 questions that are in the Q&A to our panelists. The first one is from Sylvia. She would like to know if there are any internship opportunities in your fields. And so I think that's a question that we want to cover at the end of our session. So in our second hour, I'm going to bring that question back up. So be thinking about that, panelists. And then the question that I want to ask you right now is from Peter Morrissey from the Volker Alliance. Would you be interested, the group would be interested in hearing about how it's relevant, your time in government, comparing your experience to outside the government. What makes public service different? All right, so I'm going to go to each of you and ask that same question from Peter. What makes public service different? So Gretchen, I'll start with you and then I'll go to Jamie. What makes public service different?
So I think the thing for me that makes public service different is that, when I go to work every day, that what I'm doing matters for the American people. And sometimes it's hard for people to understand how foreign policy impacts the United States and the American people, but it has a significant impact. If we are creating a safer world and a global market for United States goods, and we are increasing direct investments creation in the United States, facilitating for business people and for people who are doing well and really humanitarian work in the world. Those are all things that are benefiting our country, right? And so it's really meaningful to me to have a role in that. And I think in public diplomacy work, and we have a very significant role in that. Some of the things that I worked on in Poland, for example, were creating a supportive public environment in the Polish public for supporting their energy security goals, right? We don't want Poland to be reliant upon Russian natural gas. We want them to be energy independent. And one of the ways that we did that was we helped facilitate the sale of American liquefied natural gas to Poland to help sort of basically give them more diversity in their energy sources. So if the Russian pipeline was shut off, as has happened a couple times in the past, they weren't as vulnerable to that, right? That's good for us. Poland's an important NATO partner. They're an important EU partner. So we want to make sure that we're attending to the national security of Poland, which is good for the national security of the United States. We have many, many troops in Poland protecting the eastern flank of NATO. We want to have public support for that. So the work that we were doing was all focused on, how do we support both economic and national security goals of the United States. And that, to me, is more fulfilling and meaningful than supporting profit margins for private corporations. I do think, however, that my time in private sector was really important because I can come into a government position with a very strategic focus on how to accomplish tasks, right? I'm very focused on the return of investment of my time, of my staff's time. So having that private sector piece allows me, I think, to be much more effective as a public servant. And so I think, that's one of the things that I feel really good about every day.
Excellent example. And making an international connection as well for doing public good. Excellent. Jamie, we'll go to you. The value of working in the public sector.
one of the wonderful things about working for the department that I work for the city of LA, is that it really shows, I'm exposed to things every day that shows how government, when it really works to help people. And our department is responsible for helping people that have lost their jobs, that, youth that have dropped out of high school and don't know what to do, for small businesses that they really, they have no idea how to navigate the bureaucracy of the city of LA, and they need help just getting their foot in the door to make sure that they're able to stay open. And this has been incredibly critical during COVID-19, with so many people losing their jobs, youth being stuck at home. How do I go on ahead and get that job experience to, have that on my resume for college? Small businesses that, they had to close for months. How do they apply for, navigate the various complications of loans in order to get grants and loans to stay afloat? And so our department, like the department that I work for the city, is almost entirely grant funded. And so it's wonderful to be able to write stories that, these grants are working. We are genuinely helping people. People are benefiting from this. And in helping underserved communities, it helps the overall economy in terms of boosting it up. And so, and it's just been incredibly rewarding, and more so even than the, stories that I wrote as a journalist. But the thing is, though, it did help to have that private sector experience, because there are, and I can only speak from my experience for what I've seen in my department. And sometimes there are certain, bureaucratic things that there's some red tape. There's some folks that have done things the same way for their entire lives. And it's nice to have that other experience to say, well, why don't you try this something a little bit different? Or how can we take what's already been done and just, bring it up a notch? And so that's been incredibly helpful. And that it's something that I think that has helped, that has definitely benefited what I've brought to the table, and like what I've been able to do with or how our department has approached communications.
Excellent. Michelle, same question. Public service, how is public service different?
Yes, I'm fortunate that I've spent most of my time in public service, but I have had some private industry experience with Kaiser Permanente, for example, and my first couple jobs out of college. And there is a difference. It's hard to, I'm listening to my fellow panelists, it's hard to kind of describe it, but for me, it's that immediate impact you have on a large group, which is your community, when you are a public servant and you are in the public service space and you have an accountability to your community. Some other private industry communications, to me, you can be a little bit more focused on the group you're serving. Perhaps is you're going to kind of direct what you do to the specific group that this business is catering to or selling to, what have you. So that's kind of how I view it. Public service is definitely the route that feeds my soul, and I love having that impact and helping my community in the public health setting. Before this, it was the social service world, helping children in foster care and those receiving services to help get their footing so that they can live and function. So those are the things that matter to me. And so when I get to communicate, I'm actually messaging to help my fellow community. I love having to be extremely transparent. I mean, with the media, I have to answer everything. There's HIPAA laws are going to prevent some of the things that I can say, but I have to be completely transparent. And I've learned to enjoy that. It's very challenging, but I live here and I expect that of my county government. We should expect the best. And I feel that way every day as a public servant. So I think that's the best way I can describe it.
Thank you. Thank you. Kevin, how about you?
Yeah, when I first got out of college, I was very driven by money, and I thought making as much money as you can was going to be the secret to success and where you go in the career. And a couple years into working in the private sector, realized, that's not all that it's cracked out to be. And I was young, immature, and it took me some while to grow and figure that out. But when I saw the civil service positions available and I started applying and got one, I kind of realized that, you know, there is a bigger calling out there. And I didn't have this aha moment where it's like, yes, I want to go serve the people. But I felt the compassion for the subject matter, and in the process was able to serve people. At NASA, one of our key communications goals is helping to identify and demonstrate to the American taxpayer, the public, everybody on this call, the value that NASA has in your everyday life. And I would challenge anybody in this country, and perhaps even across the world, to tell me that NASA hasn't impacted your life in some way today, because it has, it does, and it will. And as I get into those discussions with individuals and show them how, and you see them say, oh, wow, that's really cool. So, you know, 0.1% of the federal budget going to NASA, impacting everybody every day, and people appreciating us for that, has literally spawned new industries. Without the federal government and without the US government subsidizing airmail back in the early 1930s, we wouldn't have an airline industry like we have today, a multi-trillion-dollar industry. And we're doing the same thing with the space industry. We're helping to subsidize commercial companies like Blue Origin and SpaceX to send payload to the International Space Station. And that is now starting to spawn a whole new industry that you guys will all see the benefits of it down the road. It's different medical operations you can conduct in space and research and manufacturing. It's visiting new planets, and it's expanding our horizons. So private industry is doing it, but without some federal government backing, these doors might not be open as they are to people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk to go and further explore our universe.
Thank you. Well, all of you that are listening today, you've heard from our really superstars in the public world, right? These are all folks that are choosing careers and paths in the public service industry, and we really need more people like the people on these panels that are giving their time and their service to join kind of the public world. So I'm going to take us into a different section of our presentation today. Let's talk about, how do you get a job in the public world? Let's talk about how all the fascinating stories that you've told already, how do I become one of those people that can go down some of the similar paths that you've taken? So one of the questions that Sylvia asked was, are there internship opportunities? And Kevin, you'd raised your hand there. How do we get an internship in the public sector?
Step number one, go to internship.nasa.gov. And that is our portal to NASA internships and opportunities there. And actually, I'm sorry, it's just intern.nasa.gov. And that's our webpage of where anyone can apply for there's a couple different types of internships with NASA. We look for all sorts of folks, whether you're in communications, whether you're the proverbial rocket scientists, the engineers, health physicists. We have pretty much any type of job available. And unfortunately, I had a posting that just closed yesterday, or I would tell you to go out and apply for that one, but it's already closed. And the other opportunity is the federal government resource is usajobs.gov. That's usajobs.gov. So once you graduate, if you go to that website, there are everything from entry-level positions to senior executive level positions with not just NASA, but all of federal government. And the last option I would mention, Sherry, is NASA also relies on a whole host of contractor organizations that provide support to us. It would be hard to rattle off that long list, but there's also lots of other contractor organizations that we hire to come do work for NASA. So working for one of them is another career path to doing things with NASA.
Great, thank you. Michelle, any insights into how to get public sector jobs in the area that you're in?
So yes, here in Kern County, we are part of the County of Kern family, and you have to start there. We have a human resources department, so it's very simple. It's kerncounty.com, and you go to the human resources area, and there are internship and extra help jobs is also something here where it's more short-term, 9 months at a time, and you can renew. I actually have an extra help person on my team currently because we experienced a bit of a hiring freeze due to COVID-19 that has since lifted here in our county. So yes, that's it. You know, with county jobs, you kind of have to start with more formal process. But I would say I myself did an extra help position to get my foot in the door years ago, and worked on the position, got the experience, kind of built my portfolio. And when that permanent job opened up, I applied, and I was much more competitive because I had held that position in a more temporary capacity, and it ended up helping me quite a bit.
Great, thank you. Gretchen, how about in your area?
Yeah, so for us, it's careers.state.gov.
Okay, I'm typing this in the chat. Career.
Okay. .state.gov, and there's a whole subsection on internships. It's all managed in Washington, D.C., and it is a very centralized process, but I believe they're all 10 to 12 week internships, and they're on a rotating basis throughout the year. Because we have spring and fall and summer interns. So that process has been affected by COVID, and I'm not sure exactly what the flow of it is. Like in my office, we actually have made a decision not to take interns right now because we didn't feel we could give a meaningful experience through the virtual environment. So we're looking forward to having people back in person so that we can really make it a learning experience and help people understand more effectively what we do.
Excellent. Right. Jamie, any insights into how to get into your area?
Well, at the City of LA, opportunities for part-time opportunities to work in communications roles are definitely available. I'm going to go on ahead and let's see, it's not taping. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I'm going to go on ahead in the chat and provide some links and social media information in terms of how to find jobs at the City of LA. And so these will be a good resource for folks that are considering getting a job at the city, and you know, if they'll be able to answer any further questions about that kind of thing. But similar to Gretchen, we do sort of have a freeze on some hiring because of COVID.
I'm also, I'm in the chat right now. And so the folks that are on and attending, and Kevin, I'll get right to you here in just a second. The folks that are attending, you can ask questions in the chat. It's a question and answer. It's called Q&A versus the chat feature. So if you go into the Q&A and ask a question there, I'll moderate that and ask those as we continue our discussion today. So make sure we're about halfway through our session, a little bit over halfway. So make sure to put those in the Q&A section of our Zoom today so that I can bring those to the panelists for you. And then also in the chat, Sylvia's question about internships, I put all the links that people were talking about in our panel. I put all those links under Sylvia's question, and that's listed as answered. So if you go into the question and answer, you can pick up those links. So that you can add those to your list of resources as you're building out your career plans and your job planning. So I've posted those. I'm going to check the open questions, see if there's any questions, and then I'm going to jump back into our panel discussion. So I'm just going to give it a minute here. Kevin, you had your hand raised, so I'm going to see if there's anything that you wanted to make sure you shared.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up on the internships and even for jobs from that perspective. By nature, I'm an introvert. When I do my Myers-Briggs, I'm always a flaming introvert. I just score that way, but by profession, I have to be out there and affable and in the public. But what I want to recommend to everybody out there that's applying for an internship or a job is don't just send in the resume and do a great cover letter and think that's going to run you to the top of the list. You need to be passionate about it. Call the agency, call organizations. If the facilities offer tours or if you can go meet people, do that. And the more engaged you can be and the more people you can meet, sometimes it's, and I hate to say it, but if you have a personal recommendation, that gets you noticed. If one of my colleagues were to say, oh yeah, I know so-and-so met them at this event and they presented this paper at this conference, and they did an outstanding job. They would be perfect for this. And I hear they apply. So, pay attention to that, Kevin. I will. I'll look at that. I do listen to my peer recommendations. So try to work the informal network and the formal networks as much as you work the application process itself. And then internships often do and can turn into jobs. But of the thousands of people we get applying for internships, we can only hire, whatever the number is this year. And of those people, we can only convert even a smaller number. But it's getting an internship is a huge advantage when it comes to getting that first entry-level job.
Excellent. And those are great tips. In addition, make sure that you're building out some networks with LinkedIn and some of the other business professional networks, because what you'll find is that there is somebody that that works at the firm maybe that you're applying to through those networks.
And if you volunteer for a conference, if you're helping a professor or somebody work a conference, it's amazing the number of people you'll meet. And those colleagues can become life colleagues and can open doors for you.
Yep, don't be afraid to ask for that business card when you're meeting people in person. Gretchen and then Jamie, your hands are raised.
So I would also piggyback onto what Kevin said, and I'm going to sound like your mother. Send your thank you notes. When people go out of their way to help connect you, make sure it doesn't have to be a long one, but send a thank you note. That makes a huge difference. It makes people feel good about helping you, and it makes people more likely to help you again in the future. So it's a really basic thing, but pleases and thank yous matter a lot.
Excellent tip. All right, to Jamie.
So I echo what Kevin said in terms of it does help to have a personal relationship related to, any opportunity. But I would also recommend that in applying for government jobs, also be mindful and very careful about taking a look at some of the requirements in terms of preparing your application. Make sure that you fill things out exactly as they ask of you, the order that they ask. Make sure all that specific information, but also too, something that was interesting that came up in my interview process is in the private sector, I definitely did send thank you cards and that kind of thing. But according to the regulations or the, requirements of the job that I applied for, those kind of things that they were frowned upon because they didn't want to make it seem as though, oh, you're trying to influence the people that are going to hire you. So be very careful about, taking a look at those things, because, in other agencies, it might be, people might welcome it. And even though the people that are hiring you may welcome it, there may be policies saying that you can't.
Thank you.
Sherry, can I share one more quick story?
Oh, absolutely. Love it.
So going back to, I think it was Gretchen who said this on the thank you notes. And it's funny because I have this one right here in front of me. It is a hand-drawn, hand-painted thank you note that when I was at Purdue University about 1.5 years ago, I was getting a tour of one of their computer animation labs. And I just happened to talk to this young lady who was working on a project. She wasn't part of our tour, but I stopped to say hello. We ended up talking for about 30 minutes and she explained what her program was all about. And I was really impressed. I left my business card with her, went back on our way, and we did some other things. And about a year later, she called me and said, hey, I'm really looking for internships. And she applied and she got it. And she sent me this personal thank you note, not an email, but it's a personal handwritten, hand-painted note that it's sitting in my desk drawer. It means that much to me because she went out of her way to show her appreciation. Those things make a difference.
Kevin, what a great testimonial. I love that you had a prop. You even had the actual thank you note because it makes a difference, right? You remembered that person and they were also appreciative. And as far as networking, that person kept your card for 1 year and then got back to you. And these are great testimonials as to how you can move forward with that kind of that internship, that application process, and getting to know people. The thank you note can also become something to help build the relationships over time, just to make those connections with people, especially in the internet and social media world. Making connections is so important, especially in the business and public sector. So great testimonial. All right, any other hands raised? Any other things you guys want to add from the panels? Otherwise, I'm going to go to questions, and then we have a few more questions to cover for our group today. All right, I'll jump in. We do have one question from the question and answer. I would like to know if internships are seasonal or year-round. You want to take that question? Kevin?
Ours are pretty easy. Most of our internships are summer internships. They're 10-week internships, but we do have some programs called Pathways that will be a semester-long internship. So usually from January through May. So we either have the spring, summer, or fall, but most of them are in the summer.
Great. And go ahead, Jamie. Oh, you're on mute.
There are several ways to get internships in the city of LA. During the summertime, for my department per se, we do not necessarily offer internships, but the city of LA does have a program called Hire LA's Youth, which is a summer youth employment program. It is available for youth ages 16 to 24. They do have certain income requirements and things that you can do to, in order to apply. So through various like our workforce centers, you can go ahead and apply and see if you qualify. But there are opportunities through for instance, we have a partnership with the LA Chamber of Commerce where they have this pathway where youth can get tech internships and obtain or like attain like various communications roles, social media, and that kind of thing through that avenue. And through the youth employment opportunities for the summer, and some of them are year round, but there's definitely a jump during the summertime. And these are all paid internships, which are great for youth just starting out.
Great insights into the internships, into ways to apply or look for career opportunities in the public sector. So excellent insights. All of you have different backgrounds, so it's so helpful for our attendees, I'm sure. I'm going to go with one last major question, then we'll go to see if there's any Q&A from our attendees to make sure that we're covering what they want us to ask. But the question I'm going to ask each one of you is, what general advice would you give our attendees for preparing for their career? So we've kind of given some specifics, we've given our own personal backgrounds. What general advice, in addition to the advice that we've talked about so far, would you want to give our attendees today about working in the public sector? I will start with Michelle and then Kevin.
Oh boy, that's a big question.
It is. You're saving it for the last big question.
So I would, some of this I think we've discussed, but general advice about, seeking a field in the public sector, building relationships still matters. There is a very formal process if you're going for a government job, in my experience, and in my case, it's county government. You have to start in, like everyone else, and apply through the required, protocols when it's a government position. But there are ways to, and I like what Jamie said, it's amazing how your application can get thrown out if you don't follow the instructions. And then you never even get the chance to show yourself because you didn't follow those instructions and you rushed through that application process. They can throw that application out. So I think that, following the rules, being thoughtful, being careful, but still, building those relationships in your community, in whatever job you might have, and any opportunities you can get, whether it's an internship or just kind of building that profile in your network. I have my job now because I worked here in my community in a public service in another department. My director at the time of Kern County Public Health, that is since retired, he and I would interact in different professional settings, and I stood out to him. He told me this later. He would watch my work, he would watch how I interacted with him and how I interacted with others. And when he had a position open to be his public relations person, he had to go through all of the formal processes, but he made me aware that the position was open, and I applied, and I got to where I could sit in front of him and vie for this job. And all that I had done and interacted with him earlier on, that I proved myself to him, and that ended up mattering so much. And he gave me my big break, right? So you're always being watched. You're being watched on social media. I mean, just really building those relationships is probably my best advice. And I said this once before, when I interview a candidate, something that always sticks out to me is the people that want the job and aren't afraid to say so. I think the eagerness and being able to say why you want the job is so impressive to me. And being prepared every time you are vying for a job, that you can explain with enthusiasm why it's this job you want. That's a biggie for me.
That's right. Details matter, right? The little things matter. The hard work you do pays off over time, just from the networking and the relationships. So, Kevin, you were gonna give us some insights into the general career path, right? General ideas, advice you'd give.
Sure. And just to echo what Michelle just said, one of her colleagues from Kern County, I never met her before until about a year ago. And it was through some calls she was hosting for a COVID response for the county that I was sitting in on. I got to know Megan, and it was through that process and informal interactions. And it was sort of like, wow, we've got this job coming open, Megan, why don't you apply for it? I think it'd be great. And there was a lot of fantastic applicants, but it was that personal connection that ended up helping her get to the top of the list. But I guess two pieces of advice I would give to all of the folks out there, and I gave the same advice to my kids who have just graduated college, is embrace change and follow your passion. There's only, we always say death and taxes are the only thing sure in life, but change is the other thing that is for sure in life. Your attitude, your perspectives, your goal, your family situation, your personal situation, that's all going to change as you grow older. Your values will change. And my dad worked with one company doing one job for 30 years, and then he retired. He was happy. I would be surprised if there is anybody listening to this panel today that's going to work for the same company for 30 years. Our dynamics of the nature of business have changed so much that I've held, I don't even know how many different jobs, but somebody probably has the stats, but the odds are you're going to work for 4, 5, 6 different companies and probably as many different types of jobs as well. So embrace the change and follow your passion. Your passion, whether it is a specific part of communications discipline, or whether it's working within a specific industry, whether it's working in the private industry or federal service or community service or state or city, find where your passion is. And if it's not making you happy going to work, embrace the change and find something that does. So I told that to my kids. My son didn't know what he wanted to do in life when he went to college. He knew he loved playing video games. So he thought he was going to be a video game producer or developer, but then he took a class in cybersecurity and that just clicked. And he said, yeah, I still like computers, Dad, but I don't want to do the gaming stuff. The cybersecurity stuff is really cool. And I said, do what makes you happy and find that area. And if you don't like that, change it. But so far, he's 3 years in, and he actually chose a civil service. He's working with the government as well back in Washington, D.C., doing cybersecurity work. So my daughter, she embraced the change. She had her undergraduate degree, didn't know, she thought she was going to be in environmental science. She ended up getting a degree in geology. She's now living in Australia, pursuing her PhD in geology, working for a mining company. So be adaptive and be ready for change and do what makes you happy.
Oh, great examples. And I love that your son went into public service. And your daughter's traveling internationally. So this gives our attendees some great examples of what some of the young people are doing as well. So thank you for that. Gretchen, how about you?
So I'm gonna do two things here. One, as I'm gonna add one little caveat to what Michelle said from my perspective, which is, you know, when Michelle was talking about how somebody was always watching her interactions, and that, you know, that was impressive and that led to her getting this opportunity, or Kevin talking about Megan. I also am watching to make sure if you're kind, impressive to me, and you're not to people that you perceive as lower down the chain of command. So if you're impolite to an admin assistant, I wouldn't hire you, right? That's not a choice I would make. So I think it's important to be mindful that your relationship building needs to be with everyone, because no matter how much power you think people have or don't have, it's about teamwork at the end. And the only way any of us in public service get our missions completed is because we work as a team, because we are resource starved all the time. So that's one thing. The other thing I would say specifically for this field is looking around the bend a little bit. Data science is going to be a huge component of what we do. I've been working a lot on disinformation the last couple of years. I've worked on developing a tool with a basically private sector company that uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to help find disinformation narratives so that we can disrupt them rather than react to them. That is a piece of this industry, public service or private sector, that is going to have to, that requires a lot of skill sets, or at least understanding. Because you may not ever be the person who does that work, but you will be the person who pays for that work to be done on your behalf. And so having some basic understanding of ad tech and how these components are starting to shape the information sphere is going to be really important to be successful in a communications marketing role in the future. Oh, I think you're on mute, Sherry.
Oh, thank you. Such great insights.
Sure.
And then Jamie, general career advice for our attendees.
So what I would like to say, adding on to what my esteemed panelist said, is that all of your skills are transferable, and that you can they're all building blocks to where you want to end up. And for people that are especially coming in from college or recent graduates, just think about how perhaps you were in retail and you had customer service and you had to deal with difficult customers, or that you really came through and went above and beyond what was expected of you. Those are the kind of things that you can always, especially since we're in the business of storytelling, that there's always ways to make connections between what you've worked on and how it applies to the job that you're in now. And especially, I mean, and it works both ways, like somebody that's coming in with private sector experience and people that are coming up through civil service that, for instance, I have a friend that started right out of college, and she's gone up so far and so fast and she's learned so many things from different things. And then, coming into the public sector from the outside, it's like everything that you've learned all will go to what you're going to do, and it's all about finding the right person that will give you that foot in the door. But everything that you are learning today will all work. Just apply it as much as you can to what you end up doing.
Excellent. And positive attitude in the work environment has served me well. I'm sure it served you well. And the advice that Kevin gave on change, I think is really critical. Your job description for your first job will never be the actual duties that you perform, right? That's just those are just guidelines. So we are coming towards the end of our session. Anyone on the attendees, if you have a question or answer, or question would like an answer, please post that in the question. I have one final question that I'm going to ask our panelists that I didn't prep them for, that Michelle gave me the idea for when she gave her answer to career exploration. So think about this question as folks are putting in any final questions in our session here. And this question is, what's your favorite interview question that you ask? Maybe we can give our attendees some inside scoop on a question that might come to them if you were interviewing them. What's a favorite interview question that you're going to ask that you pull out of your back pocket when you're preparing to hire someone. And so raise your hand when you haven't answered that, and I'll call on you. And I'm waiting for folks on the attendees to add to the question section of our session today. All right, Michelle has one. Favorite question you ask that maybe our attendees might get asked when they go into their interview?
Well, I think I let it out when I said, I love to hear how you're going to answer, why do you want this job? And that can be asked in a variety of ways. And having done your research and the passion, I want to hear, why do you want this particular job in this particular agency or department or business? And then the other one that I love to follow up with, if I'm able to do so, is if you could change one thing in your community right now, what would it be? I just love to see how people think, and that takes me back a little bit to what are they passionate about, especially in public service.
Great questions. Gretchen has one. Go ahead, Gretchen.
So sort of in the same vein, the way we do all of our interviews, it's the same set of questions for every candidate. So, but the one I like to add at the end is, what did I not ask you about that I should have? Because that gives them an opportunity to show me that they can synthesize the entire conversation that we've had, because an interview really is a conversation, and that they have that opportunity to sell themselves at the end, because I want to see if they can step forward to do that. And it shows me that they've thought sort of holistically about what they want to get out of the job and the opportunity that they're interviewing for. It's kind of a gimme, but it's an important one to be prepared for, I think.
Oh, and great insights for some of our attendees may not have done a lot of interviews yet. And so these are great insights. Thank you. All right, Jamie's got her hand up. Oh, put yourself off mute. Perfect.
So similar to Gretchen, we do have at the city, we do have a prescribed list of questions that we're supposed to ask candidates, and it's pretty much like a tally of scores of what their experience is. But because communications is creative and it can be innovative, and you're trying to relay certain messaging, what I would like to ask candidates is, what will you bring to the role? What kind of new things are you going to bring, things that we can improve upon, that we can start implementing, so that way we can, get our message out and have it resonate with more people.
Very good. Very good question. All right. Kevin, did you have one you wanted to add?
I think mine was similar to Gretchen's, and I love and just like Jamie and all of us, when you're interviewing for a federal job, just because of all the EEO standards and practices, as well as fairness in hiring, you have to ask all the scripted questions. And what I like to do is what Gretchen did at the end is give them the opportunity to sell yourself. And so many times that differentiates one candidate from another. And the other point as well is do the reverse up front of in an interview. Tell me about yourself. And when you give somebody an opportunity before you start asking them all the questions to tell me about yourself, that can be insightful to where they're coming from professionally, where they want to go and what they want to do. And as prospective candidates, you need to be more strategic in your response, and that is your beginning opportunity to sell yourself, to put some of your positive attitudes out there. And I think it was Michelle or somebody was talking about, we want to see positive candidates. We don't want to have a candidate bad mouthing or talking poorly about a previous job, and I want this job because my last one sucked. If I hear that, it's sort of like, you know what, maybe you suck and I don't want to talk to you. I say that jokingly, but it's the positive attitudes that you're looking for. But much like Gretchen, give me that last question and tell me what I didn't ask and why would you be good for this job?
Yeah, a public sector job is you're coming into a family, right? And so you wanna bring someone that into your family that you want to have coffee with, that you want to work with, that you want to build for the greater good together. Gretchen, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I do. And I would say, you know, that much as Michelle pointed out, and Jamie as well, on the filling out the applications in an interview, answer the question you are asked, right? I mean, when I gave the interviews at the Ritz-Carlton, that was a process you were trained for. And I mean, I'll give a little bit of background because it sort of shapes the way I address all of these scenarios going forward. But you know, they basically went out to like human resources consultants. They did a breakdown of what are the qualities that would make you successful in our industry. And then there were a series of questions that you asked on this interview. And basically every question was assigned a point value, and you either got all of the points because you answered the question, or none of the points because you may have said something really interesting, but you didn't answer the question that was asked. Because the first thing you need to be able to do to be successful in hospitality is listen to people, right? So that has shaped how I interview or try to interact, which sometimes is at odds in the way we do our job, right? Sometimes our jobs are to avoid the questions that are asked, but in an interview scenario, you want to be very clear that you're listening to the question and that you are answering exactly what's been asked, and then providing additional enthusiasm on top of that.
And Gretchen's giving you good life lessons there in the term listening, right? Listening in your classes, listening in your work world, listening to your friends, right? All that's a really good skill. It's a hard skill, so always be working on that as well. Fantastic answers. Great insights. We have one question from Catherine. Do you have any advice for those who don't have work experience? What's the best advice you can give for those who are just starting out? Raise your hand if you've got an answer for that. Kevin, looks like you've got an answer.
Yeah, I think we may not have work experience, but you have life experience. You have either dealt with adversity, you've dealt with prioritization, you've done time management, you've done all these successful skills throughout your life thus far. So while you may not have, and even if it is just flipping burgers, we all start somewhere, right? And even if you didn't have that part-time job going through high school or college, you have life lessons through classes, through interactions with students, through professional organizations, through how you deal with your siblings. So you've learned how to deal with conflict. You've learned how to promote something. So take and apply some of your life lessons you've learned thus far to the business environment and how those can benefit your prospective employer.
Yeah, don't be afraid to use those life experiences in those interview discussions. I know my kids don't want to say, oh, I was on this board or I did that. It doesn't count. It doesn't count towards it. And I say to them, it does count. We want to hear about those stories. We want to know what you've done in your life, even if it isn't a paid work experience.
Yeah, and Sherry, one of the examples, my daughter, and she was hesitant to use it, was she was in a really bad traffic accident in her middle of her college career. And through that process, she developed extreme anxiety and had to work through some of those personal issues. And being able to reprioritize some of her life activities versus extracurricular versus college, and while dealing with anxiety and learning basically how to drive again because she was that fearful of driving, that to me showed that she had a tenacious attitude. She persevered and she pushed forward to continue to meet and set her goals.
Excellent. Very good story about that. All right, anyone else have any insights to our question? Very good insights, Kevin. Thank you. Michelle has one, go ahead.
And I might have mentioned this earlier, and I had to learn this for myself coming out of college, and I had no experiences. You may not get your dream job right out the gate. And I had to learn that, and you may need to get, if there is an industry or a field that you're interested in, going for a lower level job to get your foot in the door. I mean, it sounds a little old school maybe, but I think it matters. And I think along the way, you can still be looking for other jobs. But you know, getting a job in an industry you're interested in, and then once your foot's in the door, you can begin to prove yourself internally with the people that you work with. And I worked my way up here at the county. I started out as a social worker years and years ago because of my psychology minor. That wasn't the field I wanted, but I got my foot in the door. I worked as a social worker. I learned the business of helping people and the services we offered, but there was a job I wanted, and it was the public relations person for the department. And I ended up getting the job after several years of learning and applying for the position. So that would be my advice.
Excellent, thanks, Michelle. Go ahead, Jamie.
For people that are starting out, jumping onto what Michelle said, it is important to take seriously the entry level, you know, your entree into the field that you want to do. One of the things that has, you know, one of the phrases that people have said to me is like, be hungry. And it's like they want someone that is hungry, that like really wants to do the job, that is willing to take, you know, to do any task that is given to them. And all of them are building blocks for the job that you really want. And, you know, having been on the side of being a boss and having hired somebody and they're kind of distracted and not, you know, interested in the job, it's unfortunate because, you know, this job that this entry level job that you're taking really is a chance to see what everything is doing or what everybody is doing, but also to make mistakes. You know, there are things that as you get higher in your career, you know, if you make that mistake, you're out the door. And so when you're young, it's important to, you know, just kind of learn these things, and you have an opportunity to, okay, like if you make that mistake, never make it again. And so, you know, just take your job seriously, do whatever you need, you know, do everything that's handed to you, and, you know, do a good job and do it with a smile.
Thank you. We have one more question. I think this will be our last question for our session today. We are allowed to be transparent and vulnerable in an interview. Is that not a weakness? Michelle, did you have an answer?
Isn't that funny? I'm like talking to myself and I forget you guys can see me.
Sorry about that. It's okay if you don't have an answer right now, that's fine.
No, I would say being transparent and vulnerable. That was the question.
Yep.
Are
we allowed to be transparent and vulnerable in an interview? Is that not a weakness?
Personally, for me, I believe that is not a weakness. I believe being transparent and vulnerable wisely. And I think it's that discretion, right? Answering the questions you've been asked. But yes, transparency means you're being honest. I want to sit in front of a person that's applying for a job and that they're transparent. Discretion on how you communicate. When you're asked, tell me about yourself, do I want a lifelong story? Do I want to know, you know, horrible things that happen to you? That's a transparent answer, but you need to use discretion on, is that answering the question, and am I presenting myself? So it's tricky. It's hard for me to give a clear response to that, but I believe being transparent is being honest, being vulnerable. You know, we're, as communicators, that's how we are every single day. I feel that way. So that's my thought.
Thank you. Jamie has her hand raised.
Jumping onto what Michelle said, in relaying information, being transparent and being vulnerable, make sure that you tie it to the question that is being asked and the job that you're applying for, and use these, you know, these experiences and these stories to your benefit to make sure that they understand how you're going to apply this experience to the job.
Kevin and then Gretchen.
Yeah, and exactly what Jamie just said, and kind of Michelle as well, but it's demonstrating self-awareness. None of us are perfect, and we all have different personality traits, and we all operate differently. But showing some self-awareness that if you have a a tendency to interrupt people. Do you know that? Are you aware of it? And what are you doing to fix it? If you're not the best speller in the world, in our profession, we better be pretty good spellers and writers and be able to articulate our thoughts. But if not, you need to demonstrate how you're going to fix that and what you've done to overcome it. And on the personal adversity side, it can be tricky. You don't want to put all your life story out there, but use it in a manner to demonstrate we all have weaknesses, we all have strengths, but how are you going to apply something to overcome them? And that self-awareness to show a prospective employer that, yeah, I'm not perfect, I'm human, we all are, but here's what I do bring to the table, and this is why you should hire me.
Thank you. And Gretchen?
And I would probably change transparent and vulnerable to authentic with boundaries, right? I think it's you want to be authentic with your experience in the ways that all my fellow panelists have said, but I think it's really important to understand what is appropriate for a work environment and what is not. I think my impression sometimes, and I'm going to sound like yo kids, but I think sometimes in the era of social media, there's everything gets shared with everybody all the time. And those of us who are hiring in a work environment, that's not how we started out. That's not how we grew up. And I think there's a desire to have healthy boundaries between professional and personal. And it's important to sort of understand the culture of the place that you're interviewing for to understand how that works.
Yeah, so making sure that you're researching the company, you're understanding who you're going to be interviewing with, what the position is and how you can support that role. A lot of background work that we do as we're just starting off. Go ahead, Kevin.
So Gretchen said an important word on social media, and one thing I would implore that you guys all do is as you start applying for jobs, you better believe that your prospective employers are going to troll you on social media to look and see what type of a person you are, what type of values you possess. And while it may not be part of a formal interview process, it sets some level of standard and integrity on how you act in your personal life does have some relationship to what you do in your professional life, especially if you're holding a sensitive position and a spokesperson for a key agency. So if you are getting ready to apply for a job and have some risky behavior or types of photos on your social accounts, you might want to start cleaning that up right now because your employer does look at that.
Thank you. Let me just see if there's any more questions in the question and answer as we close out today. Just some thank yous from folks. I want to say thank you to our superstars on this panel. And I want to personally thank you for going into public service. I don't think we thank you enough for the type of work you're doing. And it's been a pleasure and honor to meet you today. So I want to thank you personally and thank our attendees for listening in. You guys got to have a group of some consummate professionals that are doing good in the world. So I hope that you learned something today. I want to thank the Volker Alliance for putting together these sessions and allowing us to get in front of you to try to implore you to come to the public world. What a fantastic place to work. These different agencies, different governmental, federal, state, and local. Make sure you're doing your part. And thank you. Thank you to our panelists. Any departing words? And I'll check our Q&A. We're just getting a bunch of thank yous today. Follow up with the Volker Alliance if you have questions after this session. And continue to learn more and build out your careers. Thank you, everyone. Big round of applause.
So much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.